Good afternoon, everyone. Now, today in this session, I will talk about antimicrobial resistance. This is another emerging problem other than vector-borne diseases. I mean, after Kurumi in Congo. So this will be also an introduction for the coming other talk. So first of all, I will show the clinical impact and our situation, how we are dealing in the clinical practice. Secondly, antibiotic consumption. Of course, this is the reason, the most important thing. And finally, environmental sources. Now, we can say animal source, but I just expanded animal source to environmental source under the roof of the One Health approach. So here's the One Health approach. Maybe you can see, I don't know whether some parts of it. So animals, humans, and environments. It makes the definition of the One Health, in fact. So antimicrobial resistance, definitely depending on the population, that differs, the cultural, many reasons for the One Health. And then coming up to the cell level. So molecular biology is also very important in this topic. The genes and the mutations, everything is included here. So from the community, from animals to the world, and everything will be included in such topic. So one of the, maybe coming to the end of this symposium, so as you have seen, we are combining many other pieces. I mean, the molecular biology and travel and the animals and humans. So we have talked already about the WHO, World Health Organization, global priority pathogens for the viruses. These priorities were defined by the viruses, fungus, this time for bacteria. If you look at this picture, in 2017, there was the order of the bacteria was different, but it was revised in 2024. And Klebsiella pneumonia, which is carbapenem-resistant Klebsiella pneumonia, became the #1 problem. It is the most important problem right now. I will explain you why it is important. In 2017, Acinetobacter baumannii was the #1, but now it is, you can see, as the third problem. Also, in the other picture, as you have seen, in the high risk or the critical group problem, you can see again Enterobacterales. Under this Enterobacterales, we can talk about the Klebsiella again. There is a huge risk now for all over the world in terms of definition. If I make this figures into such a word format, you can see in the most critical point, Enterobacterales, carbapenem-resistant Klebsiella in this group. Well, second one is not a big problem for us right now at the moment, but at the third one, Acinetobacter baumannii, carbapenem resistance, again, very important. If you come up to the Pseudomonas, for instance, Pseudomonas is a risky pathogen. It has a high risk, of course, a difficult pathogen. Once upon a time, it was more important, but now, as you have seen, it is not. It is much lower than Klebsiella pneumonia. Why is it so? Still, the fatality is high with Pseudomonas infections, but the impact of the Klebsiella pneumonia is much more because it is wider. I mean, we can see 3 to 1. Let's say if you see 3 bloodstream infection with Klebsiella, only 1 with Pseudomonas. So there is 3 times, 4 times more prevalence with that. That you can see some other problems. For instance, non-typhoidal salmonella, fluoroquinolone-resistant non-typhoidal salmonella also emerging in many regions. This is also a problem, but if you compare the results, the prevalence plus fatality rates, this is much less compared to the others. And carbapenem resistance is quite common, especially in Europe, again, Southern Europe. Southern Europe is important in terms of the emergence of some vector-borne diseases and also for emergence of the antimicrobial resistance, including our country as well. And then WHO, again, just last week, the WHO published the Global Antibiotic Resistance Surveillance Report. This is an important report. And here they have all, again, as one of the most important problem, they have shown the incremental increase in Klebsiella pneumonia carbapenem resistance. There is an increase that was defined again by WHO. So coming to our example, Turkey. Turkey in this concern is important because according to OECD level countries, the mainly 4 or 5 countries have the highest problem in Europe region. Of course, I'm talking about Europe region. Turkey, Greece, Italy, Portugal, and to some extent Spain. Not France, for instance, again in the Mediterranean basin. So these countries have the highest problem. In fact, we are living this. Let's say 25 years ago, if someone would ask me what are the most important pathogens in your country, I would say Acinetobacter and Pseudomonas together. I wouldn't say Klebsiella. But in 2012, we have realized that among the bloodstream infections, the carbapenem resistance to Klebsiella is around 40%. While I'm talking about carbapenem, does everybody know about this? I don't know. Now, I thought that maybe I should explain a little bit carbapenem. First of all, I should say, let's say, the Klebsiella and E. coli, these are the most simple, I can say, widely present bacteria that they are present in the enteric levels. Therefore, they are called Enterobacteriales in our intestine, that means. And we have some certain antibiotics, let's say starting from penicillin. These are beta-lactam groups, penicillin, cephalosporins, and carbapenems. Carbapenems are the most strongest beta-lactam group antibiotics. We already have resistance to ampicillin group, cephalosporin group, but as the top level antibiotic, we are talking about the carbapenems. So now we are saying that even to carbapenems, there is a huge resistance. So this is a very bad situation. I mean, one of the last stops in this issue. So therefore, especially to see how it is increasing by the year, that we can seeing the danger and the critical level. All these data based on multicentric studies. We have in our center, we have connection with many centers. We collect some data and then we combine them. We give a picture about Turkey. If you look at this picture, I mean, this figure, this is also alarming. You see Acinetobacter, the blue one at the top, it is Acinetobacter baumannii, and the carbapenem resistance is around 90%. 90% of the Acinetobacter species are carbapenem resistant in Turkey. So this is huge. I mean, this is always a sort of impossible situation for many, many centers. And then the black one is the Klebsiella pneumonia. You can see the increase, how it is increasing by the time, going up to almost 50%. So 50% of Klebsiella pneumonia are resistant to carbapenem. So imagine how a difficult situation. And plus, now we are talking about the hypervirulent superbug. Well, this is a newspaper, but that's fine. I mean, by saying the superbug, it's a superbug, really. Plus, we have resistance. And now, secondly, another concept, which is hypervirulence. That means much more fatal bacteria, much more fatal features are combining together. I will talk more in detail about this. So then this increases the risk even much more than the just resistant bacteria, which can be called as the nightmare scenario. In this nightmare scenario, if the resistant bacteria becomes hypervirulent, that means in few hours, the patient will go into the shock. In fact, I have witnessed such one patient. So he was in shock in a couple hours that I have never seen such a situation because it was because of the hypervirulence. Then we have detected the hypervirulence. But the Klebsiella that we detected was susceptible, so therefore he was lucky. But then we were thinking, if there is both resistance and hypervirulence together, a package, a dual action, this is called nightmare, also again by WHO. I will detail a little bit about this. And now we have this I was talking about the beta-lactam antibiotics. Beta-lactam is a ring for the antibiotics. And then the bacteria is by using some enzymes destroying this beta-lactam ring and then making the antibiotic effectless. There is no effect or destroying the antibiotic. So this the classification of these beta-lactamases was done already. Also, this classification is changing. This is an Ambler classification. This is about 30 years old classification. There are some modifications, but anyway, we are trying to classify these enzymes, these bad enzymes, which are destroying our antibiotics. Beta-lactamase, they are called beta-lactamases. And many of them are metallo-beta-lactamases. These are the most dangerous ones, especially NDM. NDM means New Delhi metallo-beta-lactamase. So NDM1 originated from New Delhi, as the name says. And now we have NDM1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in different species of NDM. As you see here, this is a recent publication showing one beta-lactamase, OXA48, producing carbapenem resistant Enterobacteriales. So how it is getting widespread? OXA48 was emerged from Turkey and similar countries once upon a time, about 40 years ago or 50 years ago. Now it is disseminated all over the world again. And similarly, very similarly, the NDM producing carbapenem resistance Enterobacteriales disseminated in many cities. So once upon a time, United States was free of this kind of resistance. But now in New York, the isolates in New York is quite similar to India, the isolates in New Delhi. So this is a real danger. I worked in the United States 25 years ago when I was talking there about the gram-negative bacteria problem, resistance problem, like Acinetobacter, Pseudomonas. The Americans were saying that, oh, these are not our problems. These are the problems of the developing world. So they only had the MRSA at those days, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, but now they also have this gram-negative bacteria problem. This changes from one country to another. These are the old countries. Each box is a country, and this shows how it's colorful and diverse in terms of beta-lactamase distribution. Coming to our some studies, I will show you. We are surveying the carbapenemases, how they are changing in our country in order to define the best treatment for this kind of problems, infections. After carbapenems, we have ceftazidime avibactam. It is also, ceftazidime is a cephalosporin, but combining with avibactam, it is a beta-lactamase inhibitor. So we are inhibiting the beta-lactamase by adding such molecules. Also, for instance, ampicillin sulbactam. Sulbactam is a beta-lactamase inhibitor, or tazobactam, another inhibitor. So this is avibactam, is a beta-lactamase inhibitor, and ceftazidime avibactam is one of the newest antibiotic in the region. In our country, actually, this is the only one on top of the carbapenem use. So if there is carbapenem resistance, there is only one choice for us to use the ceftazidime avibactam. So we have done this study right before the COVID-19, and in COVID-19, we have seen that all our strains, OXA48 strains, or if there is any carbapenem resistance, that was okay. They were all susceptible to ceftazidime avibactam. We have 100% susceptibility to the ceftazidime avibactam. But then what happens after the COVID-19, or let's say COVID-19 is not the parameter, but to show as the important time point for us to compare something. So if we look at again, then we are continuing to our study to survey the situation in our country. If you look at the problem, this time these beta-lactamases are changing. For instance, NDM1 was much less in our country, but OXA48 was more common. It was about almost 90%. Now it turned out to be 65%, but NDM is increasing. Increasing of NDM is important because this is almost 25%. This ceftazidime avibactam is resistant to NDM. NDM is beta-lactamase, so therefore coming from India or from Asian, East Asia, let's say, coming to Turkey, not yet to the European countries, but we are at the, as I said, at the crossroads. We are having some bugs or some, let's say, problems from the Asia or sometimes from West, but we are just crossing them at the having the both Asia and Europe in one country. So here now the NDM positivity is around 25%. That means at least 25% of resistance against the ceftazidime avibactam. This is a great big danger for us. If you look at our studies among carbapenem-resistant samples, we collected so many samples. In fact, 427 carbapenem-resistant sample is too much. That's huge, actually. And then 42% of them are resistant to ceftazidime avibactam. This is a huge rate. It was 0 just 3 years ago. And then now it is 42%. So we can see how it's increasing in 3 years or 4 years. It's a huge increase. And then if we take out the NDM samples out then the resistance is around 30%. So 30% is a very huge rate of resistance. So what happens if there is plus hypervirulence? Does it affect the fatality? If there is carbapenem resistance, definitely we have much higher fatality, as you have seen, 4 times more fatality. Some of the samples are carbapenem susceptible, some are resistant. If carbapenem resistant comes into the stage, so then among all these patients, 4 times more fatality happens. In total, we have 635 bloodstream infections or pneumonia. I mean, collecting this number is not too bad. Collecting these numbers and the strength is not so easy. We are getting all these samples to our center. We are not a state center, or we are independent in terms of funding by some other sources. So then carbapenem resistance increased the fatality 4 times. So if you look at the multivariate analysis among the carbapenem resistant ones, this time ceftazidime avibactam resistance increased the fatality 1.7 times more. Age is always a factor, of course. The age over 70 or 60 is a problem in terms of fatality. And if we look at the hypervirulent Klebsiella, interestingly, there is no effect of hypervirulent Klebsiella. So the nightmare didn't happen in our sample. So we were scaring about to show this effect, increasing the fatality even more, but hypervirulence, but it didn't show. I mean, so this is the data. What can we do? So there is another issues that we should explore more in terms of molecular biology. So according to WHO report was released at July 2024, there is a moderate level of risk for hypervirulence. They say that there is a moderate risk. So we should do some more studies in order to understand the hypervirulence. There are some papers already published showing that the hypervirulence is increasing. This is true. Hypervirulence started again from East Asia, and now it's increasing year by year. So you can see, even this is an old slide. This is in 2021. 1 year, 2 years is too much time in terms of antimicrobial resistance. You can see how it was originated, but now we have in Turkey quite commonly. And according to some reports, some authors, they say that definitely there is higher mortality rate with hypervirulence. This is one of that study, especially for meningitis. And the papers coming from China shows that there is higher risk of fatality and meningitis. That means much more severe cases. So then if there is hypervirulent Klebsiella, they highlight that there is meningitis, there is diffuse disseminated infection going up to the brain and having meningitis. This is one of the paper. In fact, I don't know your opinions, but I'm a bit skeptical with 2 groups in terms of the publication group, Frontiers and MDPI groups. While we are here, that I can talk a little bit about the publication issues. So they are not predatory journal, of course. I mean, but they are publishing the papers very easily, that for the MDPI and Frontier. For instance, in my group, now I don't, I tell to all the people that don't submit the papers to MDPI and Frontier. So this is a Frontier group. So then I'm not, this is a publication issue is totally different and a mess. In ESCMID, I was working as the publication officer, so I know very well. I was communicating with Elsevier or Wiley, etc. These are huge sectors. I mean, and based on the peer review. Sometimes the peer review is not something like totally 100% trustable thing. I mean, all these papers, journals can publish sometimes some wrong or mistakeful lots of papers. That's fun, understandable. But especially, I'm very skeptical for MDPI and Frontier Journal. I don't know, maybe some of you could be editor, but they're also suggesting being an editor or author, or, you know, they are very aggressive. They are not predator, but they are aggressive journals. And let's say, for instance, after some years, few years, still we are asking the question, is hyperviolent Klebsiella pneumonia more fatal? This is our question. So according to the previous papers, it was yes, they were saying, okay, they are more fatal. But in fact, if I look at these papers, sometimes even hyperviolent Klebsiella pneumonia have better clinical outcome compared to non-hypervirulent ones. So there are now controversial results coming up from some other studies, especially there is one study, this is good, from Nature Communication, genomically defined hyperviolent Klebsiella pneumonia contributed early onset increased mortality, they say. But if you look at the numbers, if you read the paper carefully, there is not much difference. They are making some subgroup analysis and they can show more fatality or less fatality. In a way, there is something, of course, there is something increasing the fatality, but it should be detailed. We need more detailed studies. At the moment, we cannot say directly. What does hypervirulent Klebsiella means? There should be an abscess in liver, that we had such patients, for instance, I know very well, in liver abscess, or severe pneumonia, endophthalmitis, meningitis, that means distant area, let's say, not expected, unusual distant organ involvement is important. If you look at the many meta-analysis or systematic review like this one, you can see the definition is not solid, or there is no one consent definition for hypervirulence. There are different definitions, but we should have a certain open, clear, precise definition, first of all. And just timely, in Lancet Microbe, it was defined that, it was written that the hypervirulence should be more prudently defined at the molecular level or the clinical level. We are at that level now. We have to come together and define the hypervirulence. What does it mean, and what do we mean by hypervirulent Klebsiella? So while we were working on some new antibiotic options, cefiderocol is a new one, actually. I don't know. I'm sorry that not everyone is clinician or knows about these new antibiotics. These are very important for us, in like having a new antibiotic, so we are welcoming these antibiotics. But just 1 week ago, there was a new paper, came from this time Lancet group. But in fact, again, I'm quite skeptical about this paper as well, because why I'm skeptical? Because they say they put all single gram-negative bacteria together and say that cefiderocol is not inferior. That means not too bad. I mean, it is not superior, but it is not non-inferior. So that means, but in terms of the planning design of the study, there is a important problem, because they are looking for everything, every single gram-negative bacteria, E. coli, Klebsiella, Pseudomonas. But E. coli is not a problem at the moment. The carbapenem resistance against E. coli is very low, even in Southern European countries, including Turkey as well. We have maybe 5%. It is you cannot compare the E. coli problem with Klebsiella. There's a huge differences. But if you mix together oranges and apples, you mix together, and you cannot say that cefiderocol is good and working. So according to this paper as well, we are not hopeful for cefiderocol, and still we should continue with our choices that we have in our hands. And this is our suggestion from country like this. Let's say for ceftazidime avibactam, except the metallo-beta-lactamases group, it works at the moment, although we have increasing resistance. But we are waiting another one, Aztreonam avibactam. Aztreonam avibactam, again, unfortunately, they are all products of pharma, and they are very expensive drugs, by the way. And we use, for instance, ceftazidime avibactam only in intensive care units. Otherwise, it is very expensive, and we are having very fast resistance to ceftazidime avibactam. The same company now introducing the Aztreonam avibactam. So after having very high resistance of ceftazidime avibactam, we have to welcome the Aztreonam avibactam, and we will see how long will it take to get resistance against it. So this seems like we have to really change the game. The name of this study was Game Changer, but they couldn't change the game, I think. But in order to change the game, we need to think, maybe more revolutionary or more creative, something other than antibiotics, or we should have an ultra antibiotic or something like this, that at the moment we don't have such a choice. Coming to the second part, now why we are having so much antimicrobial resistance, this is because of the antibiotic consumption. Again, if you see here, these are all our studies. Antibiotic consumption is increasing in Turkey. We have calculated this depending on how many antibiotics do you have in prescription. What is the proportion or percent of the antibiotics in one prescription? Let's say it is 40% here. You see 40%. This is too much in terms of having antibiotic prescription. So the consumption of antibiotic is very much high in many countries. Many countries now have to follow on one hand, antibiotic resistance, on second hand, antibiotic consumption. We have to survey this, just like surveillance of the emerging infections. In each capsule, the left side of each capsule shows the antibiotic resistance. The other side of each capsule shows the antimicrobial consumption surveillance for each country. These lines, the rows are the countries, showing that whether there is a antibiotic resistance surveillance or antibiotic consumption surveillance. Some countries have both of them, as you see here, but some countries only one of them, or some countries have done none of them. So, but we need two of these, both of them together, antimicrobial consumption and resistance surveillance. Again, if you look at here, the WHO report and published in Lancet Infectious Diseases, so we can see the consumptions are also increasing in every countries. And depending on the consumption, we can try to understand the emerging resistance index. They develop such an index. It says how likely to have, for instance, for certain antibiotic to have an emerging resistance in the future. These are mathematical manipulations that we were, in the morning session, we were teasing with the prediction. What is prediction? Okay, but there is such a definition. They say emerging resistance index for some antibiotics, for instance. Look at the ceftazidime avibactam. Okay, it is not too much, but for imipenem relebactam, this is a new drug. Even many countries don't have this. There is already high emerging resistance index. You have seen already ceftazidime avibactam, how it was acquired the resistance in 2-3 years from 0 to 50% increase. So now, although its emerging resistance index is not too much, but what about the others? Their emerging index, resistance index is much, much higher. So therefore, it shows that the future is not promising. So how can we decrease the antibiotic consumption? There are many aspects, there are many facets. One of them is convincing our peers, the physicians. So we have performed a Delphi survey among the how many 5 countries, in fact, Portugal, Italy, Greece, Turkey. Okay, Malta was the 5th one, but we excluded Malta. Malta is a small island, as you know. So 4 countries. From 4 countries, we have done at national level survey with the physicians. Some of them are GP, general practitioners. Some of them are ear, nose, throat physicians, because most of the resistant problems comes from upper respiratory tract infections. Over prescription, over antibiotics for upper respiratory tract infections, also in our country. If we look at the results among all these 4 countries, I can talk more about my country, for instance. The physicians say that the time allocated for them to see a patient is quite limited. That means there is a pressure on them. For instance, sometimes they see 50 patients a day. So therefore, they don't want to spend time to convince the patient for not to give antibiotic. They just write antibiotic. And then otherwise, there is a violence against the physicians. So this is true. Even some physicians have been killed by the patients, not because of antibiotic mainly, but especially the surgeons, of course, they're under risk. So in our country, the violence against physicians is a very high public health problem to me. So just like in parallel with antibiotic consumption, there is a relation between antibiotic consumption, in some other papers as well, the corruption in that country and violence, they are all together. It's a package, in fact. Politically, it's a package. Because we can understand very well here. They say that I don't want to get a risk with the patient, so then I want to write the antibiotic and get rid of the pressure, potential pressure of the patient. Because the patient comes to the hospital, to the physician, say that I need this antibiotic, and then if he or she doesn't write this antibiotic, prescribe this, so then ask, why don't you do it, etc. A fight starts afterwards. But to me, the most important problem, we should increase infection control measures. Our rate of antibiotic resistance is very high in some cities. Even I said for ceftazidime, avibactam, antibiotic, it was 40%. It goes up to 80% in some provinces. The main difference in these provinces is they are not good in infection control, because the resistant microorganism is circulating in the hospital. There are outbreaks. Even we cannot call them outbreak, they are endemic in some hospital level. So, we have seen this again by making the PFGs, pulse field gel electrophoresis, to see the similar ones, the same ones of the circulating bacteria. So then, if we increase the infection control, we will be much happier. We will control or limit that problem, in fact. In fact, we have succeeded this in our 2 hospitals. We have 2 hospitals. I am the chair of also the infection control of these 2 hospitals. We have eliminated the Acinetobacter infection, for instance, in our hospitals, just to show to the people. But these are 2 exceptions in all over Turkey. If you go to an intensive care unit in any hospital, in any place, any province of Turkey, you will see that in intensive care, at least 30%, 40, maybe 70% of the patients have Acinetobacter infections. And the physicians feel desperate. They say, well, this is something like a part of nature or something. We should accept this Acinetobacter as a part of our life. But we are saying, no, you should just do a dedicated infection control work. This includes high discipline, dedicated personnel, dedicated nurses, working together with the physicians and nurses all together. Of course, the support of the administration as well, and the infrastructure. But let's say our infrastructure is more or less the same with other hospitals. But the dedication is quite important in infection control. So we have in order to have the surveillance, definitely we need molecular diagnostics to see if there is an outbreak, for instance. If there is an outbreak, we can detect with molecular diagnostics, and we should follow up with hyperviolence Klebsiella as well. What does it mean? We have to report the fatality and the problems for the future. So, coming to the last part, I will finish the last part. This was about the environmental or animal source. What is the role of the animal source or the environmental source? In order to understand this, first of all, we need more evidence. For the evidence or the study design or the methodology of the study, we should know about the genomic linkage, the molecular features, let's say, coming from the animal and combining with the human population. Such studies are very rare. I mean, for a long time, we were lacking that kind of studies. So comparing the animal source and the human source. And secondly, we can do some ecological experiments. That means follow up the AMR decline. I mean, we have started some intervention and then checking for the AMR. In order to do this, we should do surveillance, just like what I have just showed here. If you are doing the AMR surveillance together with AMR consumption and use both in animals and the humans, then you can talk about this. I will give a good example about this, actually, how it was done. And then epidemiologic correlation. Well, this is moderate level. If you can make sometimes some of the papers, some of the studies are quite vague. I mean, they are, let's say, not weak, but the moderate level studies. These are just showing overall or the broad correlation. But these two are the top two are important. What kind of bacteria can be seen also as the animal source in terms of increasing the antimicrobial resistance? Almost all of them. I mean, all of them you can see here could be the animal source. What kind of animals? Could be domestic animals, even the pets. We were talking about the pets. I will come also to the how the pets affected the our life with antimicrobial resistance, and also the pollution. Let's say the industrial polluted surface water has the worst character. This is also linked to maybe the climate change as well. I mean, and the pollution itself is a risk for antimicrobial resistance. There are some good studies checking for the waste, industrial waste, and then looking for the molecular level in order to detect the antimicrobial resistance here. And some antibiotics, again, some molecules, resistant molecules, can be present in the soil. The soil is important in order to keep or preserve the resistant microbes, resistant E. coli, resistant Carbapena, the Klebsiella, etc. It can be detected in the soil as well. How it is developing? So we can easily see genetic changes. During their stay in soil, we can talk about some mutations as well, recombination and mutation. This happens in the soil. Therefore, one health approach is really important. And then from the soil, the animals can get this resistant bacteria, or humans directly can get, and interface between the animals and the humans can affect the antimicrobial resistance. This is very important study. I think one of the good studies published up to now, published this year. You can see maybe it's small, you cannot read from the behind, but you can see the pets here or the domestic animals, horse, cat, dog, etc. And what kind of molecular MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, was detected from these pets that you can see. Here, there is a bilateral transmission. From pets, we can get the infection, I mean bacteria. Also, we can give some bacteria to the pets. This happens especially in veterinary clinics. They highlight the veterinary clinics. Or, like that we were talking 2 days, the pets coming to hospital or, you know, to the homes, etc., with playing with the kids. But this shows very well, clearly this time, at the molecular level, from the animals, how we can get the resistant bacteria. This is MRSA, but this is E. coli. Again, all over the world. But of course, at the countries where they do both human and animal surveillance, both of them are quite important. There are very rare and few countries they correlate or compare the human and animal sources. One of them is Holland, actually. In Holland, they do it research very well, and also in Canada. This paper came from Canada. Even it is not possible to do in United States because the farm owners do not allow to make that kind of stuff. This is again a very nice study. This time, our problem coming to the carbapenemase genes identified in companion animals. So I was talking about the carbapenem-resistant Klebsiella. To me, or not to me, according to WHO, it has the highest potential, most critical agent. But we have them in the pets. And these are the studies reported the carbapenem-resistant genes identified in the animals. So this shows very clearly that there is no doubt getting the infection from the pets or the animals, just like the other human beings as well. And that one from China, the fecal carriage of carbapenemase producing organism in healthcare and veterinary associated setting in China. You can see as again here, NDM types, New Delhi metallobeta-lactamases, not one, but up to NDM5 was detected in veterinary clinics in China and correlating well together with the human infections as well. So, but a good example, good news from France. In France, actually, they really pay attention about it. They spent time or money as well, of course, to decrease antimicrobial resistance. They are very seriously doing this because as you look at the Mediterranean countries, we say that this is a cliche. We say, okay, in Southern European countries have such a high problem of antimicrobial resistance. But what about France? France also is a Southern Mediterranean country. But they are spending a lot of efforts on the antimicrobial resistance. If you look at here, they are writing this as this is an editorial to Lancet to showing that they have applied strict measures. That means controlling of the animal farm antibiotics, using the antibiotics in certain animal farms, and they reduced the fluoroquinolone resistance. And this is just like the ecological survey, of course, not directly at the molecular level. At the beginning, I showed you two important methodology. One was ecological one. So this is an example to the ecological example. But this is fluoroquinolones. That means ciprofloxacin, etc. We need to do more studies about carbapenem resistance. Coming to the end. So in fact, now we have the so-called AI as well, artificial intelligence to control everything. This is like a summary of what I have said or what we are talking about the AMR, including infection prevention and control. To me, it's very important. Maybe we should incorporate the AI. There are lots of attempts to incorporate the AI in infection control practices. I mean, probably we will manage. I don't know. And then epidemiology, surveillance, and forecasting. These are, again, very important. We are all highlighting the surveillance, starting from the first session. And pathogen characterization, that means molecular studies. We need that. Drug development, again. Maybe we should make some, innovative, revolutionary attempts for drug development. If you develop the drugs like it in the past, it takes too much time. Dr. Solomon was also talking about combining the phases. I mean, if you wait, just like in the past, before pandemic, let's say, phase 1, then phase 2, phase 3, etc., it takes about 10 years, almost 10 years. So during the pandemic, we have learned that we have to squeeze them. We have to make it much shorter. Even maybe we can make some direct connection by the developers in the future. I don't know. So we are hopeful for AI, but I don't know how we are going to do this. And then it summarizes all the infection control issues. Of course, this is a nice picture. I mean, very nice, showing everything. But in the practice that we are going to deal with, it is not easy. We have to get every piece together, trying to make it a functionally working capacity. So in conclusion, so we have this animal source or environmental source as a problem for AMR. This is a great problem. We have to make good surveillance. We have to also need some evidence based on good methodology. So the methodology is important, connecting the human and animal evidence together. And we need a lot of attempts at many levels. I mean, as you have seen at the physician level, I gave this example, and then politician level, people's level, we have to educate the people. It's a multifaceted, a very difficult on one hand effort, but it needs dedicated people. There need to be some dedicated people. For instance, in my country, definitely it's like being the hero of pandemic or something. We need heroes for antimicrobial stewardship. So therefore, at the end, by the surveillance and the policymaker involvement, etc., we can manage. Otherwise, it is not good. I mean, in the near future, we will have no antibiotics. And developing antibiotics in that way is also not working, as I have shown here. Hopefully, we will solve these problems altogether in the future. Thank you for your patience.